Hello, welcome again to another video on the channel, and today it is finally Friday the 24th of September, and as you know, it is the Buffy day. Now, before we carry on, please do like, comment and subscribe. It's all much appreciated. We're just going to get that out of the way, done and dusted, and then we can carry on with what we're doing. So, again, before we carry on as well, we are going to explain exactly how this is going to work. For the next 7 weeks, I am going to be talking about Buffy, the Vampire Slayer. And what this details is just me. Every week, I'll talk about one season of Buffy, one video, every Friday. Starting with season 1, of course, working our way up to season 7. So how it works is I will do the good, the bad, and the ugly of the season. So we got episodes that I love, episodes that maybe I don't necessarily hate, but are not the best in the season, and then some of the ugly moments of the series each season as you go on. I think it was the hardest to pick a good episode for season 1. Season 1 for me is a bit of a weak season, so let's get going with Buffy, the Slayer of the Vampires. So yes, here we are, starting with season 1. And for me, as I said, season 1 is a weak season in comparison to the rest of the series, simply because of what we get later on in the series is a lot better. I absolutely love Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as you're aware, and I will get more into why I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer during the season 7 talk, because you will get an extra video where I talk about the season in general. Now, I've done that before and talked about Buffy in general on my channel before, but not quite in depth, and that last video will be the 8th week, the 8th Friday, will be me talking about the series in general, but you might get glimpses of me talking about the series as a whole throughout the talk of each season, basically. So we are going to start with what I find the best episode of the series, and it is Prophecy Girl. Prophecy Girl being the season finale for season 1, and for me it just does everything right. You know, it closes off the season. The series could have ended there quite easily. You know, you get a story of Buffy, and it could have gone on to be sort of an anthology series. Obviously, the key line being that it wouldn't be Buffy the Vampire Slayer anymore; it would be Kendra the Vampire Slayer. Or, you know, just throwing names out there. Of course, Kendra doesn't exist yet. But for this episode particular, there is so much in there to delve into. For starters, when Buffy finds out that she, for this prophecy, that she is going to die, she gets very upset, as understandable. You know, she gets very upset at Giles, she gets very upset at Angel, who happens to be there when she finds out, which I think is a bigger kick, because obviously they're starting to get closer at this point. They're a lot more, you know, they're not necessarily together at this point, but the feelings are there. And it's such a good, rich scene in the episode. Buffy's basically telling them to fuck off, that she doesn't want to do this anymore, that it's not fair, that she's 16. I believe she's 16 at this point. She's already had her 16th birthday in this season. Could be wrong there. I think this season and season 7 are the only times where you don't see Buffy's birthday. But I'm pretty sure that she starts out 15 and she's 16 by the end of the season. That's not an important point, it's just me going on a tangent. But it is actually really hard for Buffy to actually realise that, you know, she's 16 years old. She's not going to be able to, you know, go to prom, get a boyfriend, get married, have kids, because of this stupid prophecy stating that she's going to die. And it's a big scene. It's actually a quite tearful scene, and, like, you know, I get the odd tear, the odd man tear come through. For the first time in the Buffy universe, in this scene. The rest of the episode pretty works. You know, after this moment pretty much works as you think it would. Buffy's trying to leave Sunnydale with her mother, thinking that, you know, she can change the future. You know, it's not necessarily a sort of like, oh, the prophecy. It's just words. You know, that's what it is to Buffy. It is just words in a book that states that the Slayer will die. You know, there's a little bit of like, because it doesn't actually name the Slayer in that book. How could it? You know what I mean? But this has been obviously written that the Master will get released during that date, that evening, or the next night. I think it's either that night or the next night. It's one or the other. And there's this whole thing that's like Buffy's trying to leave with Joyce, with her mother, because she thinks that that's the best thing that they can do to try and change things. But obviously Joyce has, I mean, they've just moved to Sunnydale not long ago. Like, if we're taking it as roughly a year during this season, you know, 8 months to a year in this season alone, they haven't been in Sunnydale very long. And for Buffy to say, you know, we've got to leave, is, you know, it's quite difficult for Joyce to understand why she's saying this. You know, you've got this dance coming up and she's not going to the dance, but Joyce has brought her a dress for it, and Joyce is just getting started with the art gallery thing, and she's settled. But for Buffy, the only way out is for her to leave Sunnydale with Joyce. This is something that comes up again later on in season 3, at the end of season 3, where Buffy decides that Joyce needs to be out the way, so she can, basically she doesn't have to worry about one, you know, it's one less person for Buffy to worry about that she loves, is to get Joyce out during graduation. Something that, you know, again, season 2 also harkens on this idea that Buffy leaves because it's a way of dealing with things. Something that I think as a child, and having all this responsibility on her, it's just not easy for Buffy. Therefore, she needs to have a bit of time aside, and she just needs time to breathe. But she doesn't get that because she's the Slayer, and like, you know, with great Slayer power comes great Slayer responsibility. In this instance, of course, we also get the side story of Xander. He's obviously got feelings for Buffy, and it doesn't get reciprocated. There's no point at all where Buffy has feelings for Xander. She loves Xander, but not in the way that Xander wants her to love him. And he's very upset when Buffy turns him down for this dance. And Xander, you know, there's a love-hate relationship with Xander in the Buffyverse. I'm one that, like, you know, he has his moments, but he can be a bit of a dick. And it's like, again, it comes back to this whole thing about, like, Buffy's relationship is not important to Xander, which is in season 6 pointed out. But Xander's like, in that moment, Xander in that season, again, you know, I'm going on tangents here, but this is what it's going to be like for the rest of my thing, you know. I said I'm going to be talking about certain points. This is what it's like. But for Xander, it's been that, like, he's had a say in her relationships, but he never has. You watch the season back, there is not a point where Xander says, oh, you shouldn't go out with him, and Buffy doesn't. Or, you know, he's now good for you, and Buffy listens. There's never a point like that. So for some reason, later on when Xander says that, it's not true. I think Xander still has a little bit of hate for the fact that Buffy never said yes to him, and I think it sticks throughout the rest of the series that Xander's quite hard. His heart has been hardened because he doesn't get the love of his life, sort of thing. I think that for Xander, if Buffy had turned around and said yes, things would be different. And Buffy might have actually had a boyfriend throughout the series with Xander. But of course, at this point, you know, Xander says that you got to be dead, you know, pale and dead. You know, I can't remember the exact words he says, but Xander says this, and obviously that is a very dick move by Xander. You know, you can't always help who you fall in love with. That is very important in life, that falling in love is not easy and it's never just straightforward. There's always going to be something in the way, and for Xander it's Angel, or you know, I mean, it never really gets brought up later on about Xander's feelings for Buffy once Angel's out the way. And I think it's just the fact that Xander sort of realises that he's never going to get the girl. But in this moment, he's really harsh. And the fact that he actually does turn around and correct himself and say, you know, I shouldn't have said that. Fair dues. You know exactly what you've done. You know what you've done wrong. And you're moving on with it. But, you know, in this moment, Xander is a bit of a dick. So then, obviously, Xander's upset. He's chucking a ball in a classroom, which I think, you know, a teacher come along, he'd be like, you know, I'll confiscate that till the end of the day, sort of thing. But, you know, Xander's in a classroom. Willow meets up with him, and he tries to say to Willow, I mean, at this point, obviously, we've had the scene where Xander's practicing on Willow of how to ask, before Xander asked, of course. And Willow clearly has feelings for Xander, but Xander, I think, for me, Xander always treated Willow as more like a best friend, sister type of thing. But for Willow, it was always a little bit more. I know that just sounds a little creepy later on, because obviously Xander and Willow have this sort of fling behind Oz and Cordelia's back. But for me, you know, it has always been that sort of thing, and it sort of turns that way more so after that fling and moving on. That, you know, for Xander, Willow is a little sister. Or a bigger sister. We never really get into the age thing of who's older. I imagine Xander's older, but that's just me because I've got a little sister who's 2 years younger than me, so maybe that's where my forefront is coming from that. But anyway, again, another little tangent. So yeah, Willow comes into the classroom while Xander's chucking this ball against the wall. Xander's very upset about Buffy saying no, and he asks Willow to the dance, and it's like, you know, oh yeah, we can go, we can be friends. And Willow's like, hell no. But she's not hell no, but she's like, no, it's not happening. I'm not going to be second fiddle to Buffy. It's not fair on Willow. It's definitely not fair on Willow, because obviously Willow would have happily said yes if Xander had happened to ask Willow in the first place for reasons that he's asking Buffy. But that's not what goes down. And Willow is in her right here. You know, she would rather have Xander ask her because he wants to go with her, not because he's, you know, upset and he just wants somebody to go with at this point. And he thinks Willow was going to say yes instantly, and it's like, for a moment, Xander doesn't realise that Willow said no, but then it's like, he really shuns Willow in this moment, and it's just unacceptable from Xander, because why would you think that Willow would say yes in this moment? You're not asking her for the right reasons. It's not fair. Don't do it. So moving on, and we are going to speed up now because obviously things have slowed down. I've talked about things in the wrong order, which happens sometimes, but it's fine. So we are going to move up to the big parts of this episode, and why I love the episode so much as well, is that Buffy does indeed die. She goes off on her own. Giles is like, you know, I've got to stop the Master from getting free. Giles wants to go. Buffy knocks him out, you know, and she turns to Jenny, and she's like, tell him, oh, I don't know, just tell him something, and say I said it, you know what I mean? It's like, Buffy goes out around the Anointed One, which is a storyline that's a bit, the Anointed One takes Buffy to the Master, and I absolutely love the scene between Buffy and the Master in this, like, this first meeting, of course, which it is, and it's like, Buffy is clearly scared because she knows about the prophecy and she thinks, right, well, this is going to be it. But she's not going to go without a fight. However, the Master does power Buffy, and in the end, Buffy dies. Of course, Xander goes to Angel, which he's not happy about, asking Angel for help. Because, because Xander knows that the only person that can help is Angel. Sort of like how down the line and down the series, the only person that can help is Spike. And it's the same sort of thing. And it is really well written and really well worked in. Obviously, Xander brings Buffy back to life, and she's like all empowered, all inclusive power. It's like she just sort of feels like, you know what, I feel different, I feel empowered, I feel stronger, better. And it is possibly a case that, that the Slayer heritage is now moved out of her, and she's now purely just this powerhouse made just to do what it is that they're meant to do. But there's no sort of like feeling of dread, or there's now like, it's all just lifted. The sort of responsibility, part of the responsibility has been lifted, because she no longer is the line of the Slayers anymore. It's moved on, and I think that's why she feels so different in this moment. She's come back, she's still a Slayer, but it's not like she's the Slayer for this purpose, you know what I mean? She's a Slayer, and it's good. And you get this moment where they're kicking ass, and the Buffy theme comes up, and I absolutely love that scene. Buffy overpowers the Master, kills the Master. You get some great stuff in the library with Giles, Cordelia, Jenny, Willow, all of them in the library. It's a very good scene. I love seeing that, and I like seeing that Angel, like, he's protective of Buffy. He's very protective of Buffy in this episode. And of course we get to the end when obviously the Master's dead and everyone's together, and there's this sort of line of everyone saying that Buffy's dress, that they love Buffy's dress, which, it's a good dress. It's a good dress, and it's a good look for Buffy. And of course we end on a slower Buffy theme during this scene when they're talking, and they're all like, well, we've finished with the Master, that's it, what do we do now? Sort of thing. And it's absolutely brilliant, and it's something that never came back up in the series, which I would have loved, especially at the end. I think it would have been perfect to play the titles at the end in the slower Buffy theme that we get in season 1, at the end of this season, but for me, that is the best episode of the series. I just love the way that they develop these characters. They get them to do a lot more in this episode, and of course it's a season finale, so there is a lot more to do, and there's a lot more to delve into than the rest of the series. And I think it's a very powerful ending to what I think is probably one of the weaker seasons of Buffy. Not necessarily that I hate the season, but it is weaker for me. But anyway, absolutely brilliant. So the next episode is one that I'm not going to be talking about as much, and it's simply because I don't remember it as much. I've rewatched the series purely for these videos, so it's fresh in my mind. I'm hoping that in 7 weeks' time the episodes for season 7 are as fresh. I may have to go through the episodes that I'm going to be talking about there, but for me this one is not one to talk about all that much. This is the only episode in this season that I find really struggles, and that is Never Kill a Boy on the First Date. I think I get the idea of it is that, Buffy can't be going on dates and can't be telling people that she's a Slayer, so she has to keep it a secret. There's this whole thing in the background of the Anointed One, a storyline which obviously had to be dropped because the idea of it was that it was going to be a kid that doesn't age, but of course kids do age quite easily, whereas with an adult that's fully formed, you could easily just make them look younger. Like how you've had Spike and Angel throughout the series sort of look the same. Angel put some weight on down the line. Spike put weight on in the sense of he bulked up, tidy bit. Because when you first see Spike in the first season, when he first introduced in the second season, and then you get, of course, the later Spike is more formed. He's not the skinny vampire that we know at the start, and he's a lot, you know what I mean? I think it's because he gets more screen time, he's thinking, I'm going to have to look good. because I'm going to be on TV more. You know, it's a fair point. It works. So, yeah, Never Kill a Boy. Again, Never Kill a Boy on the First Date is just not... It's not a great episode. It's not a bad episode. And it probably... And, you know, there was a couple of other episodes in this season that I did look at. But, for me, this is the one that... If ever I were to skip an episode, this is the episode I would skip. Don't ask me why. I don't know what it is. It's just not my kind of cup of tea when it comes to the Buffy universe. Similar to the vein of Him. However, that is not a weak episode. I think there's some good points in that episode, but it's sort of the same vein of like, what's the point? That sort of thing. But again, you do get something, as I say, the key moment in this episode is, of course, the anointing one that I think that they've actually killed him. But in fact, they haven't. So yeah, that's the bad side of this season, sort of thing, to a certain extent. And of course, we get now to the ugly. And for me, the ugly side of this series is the pack. Now, I was considering putting this as the worst episode of the series, of the season. But for me, I think that the pack is actually really enjoyable to watch. It's not a brilliant episode by all means, but it's a brilliant episode to watch. But the ugly side of it is, of course, Mr. Flutie gets eaten. And the pig, who I've forgotten the name of. But you know, I mean, it's very centric to sort of like the pack is an episode where it's like, you know, you get your groups in high school, and the pack is one of those groups, and it's like that. It's sort of like that, but they're all bullies who happen to eat people, and they're like hyenas and everything like that. But for me, the pack is just a weak side of Buffy coming through. Again, most of the time it will be that I will be pointing out things that happen in those episodes that are weaker. But for this instance, for this season per se, the ugly side of it is the episode itself and not what happens in the episode. So that's the good, the bad, and the ugly side of the season. And I'm going to talk about a bit more now about the season itself. For me, season 1 does have a lot of struggles. You know, the first few episodes are really like, it really gets to the point of what this series is about. Then you get down to the weird stuff, like the stuff with the puppet, Sid, and some other key plots in this season. But for me, I don't know, maybe it's because of the shorter season. I've always said this about any series, that when the first season gets a shorter season, it doesn't have that chance to give you that wow factor. You put anybody in front of Buffy for the first time, they're not going to want to stick with it because of season 1. There's some great episodes, like Angel is a wonderful episode of the first season and was very close to being my top episode of the series, but I think the final episode does do better. But for me, it just works so well as a first season, enough to get you enticed, but there are times where you're sitting there thinking, what is this? Why am I watching it? Why is this something that I want to keep watching? And believe me, you want to keep watching. There is so much good season 2 onwards. You know, even the sort of rougher seasons, like season 6 is a very rough season. It's not a bad season, like most people say it is. It's a very rough season, but you get some very key episodes. Just like season 4 is a very rough season, but you get key episodes that are so much fun. There's the fun side of Buffy, there's the serious side of Buffy, and there's somewhere in between. Serious side of Buffy can sometimes get up here, especially during season 6. It's dark season 6. But you know, every series that goes around always has this struggle with season 1. Like the season 1 is the set up for the rest of the series. So you want enough time to spend with the characters, you want enough time to develop the characters during that first season, because if you don't get the rest of a series, you've only got one season to look at, and that's where the struggle with Buffy can come in. is that if it did end on season 1, that's it. It's not rewatchable to a certain extent. But the rest of the series really ups the game, and that's why we get Buffy the way that everybody loves Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So, for me, if I had to give a rating, which I will be giving each season a rating, because you know, I don't usually do ratings on my channel. I don't like doing ratings on my channel because if I ever revisit things, my ratings change and can depend on how I'm feeling that day, on whether or not I'm going to give it a good rating, or if something has pissed me off in the series itself, that's going to give it a bad rating for that video. But then if I don't think about that, if I revisit a series, then obviously I'm going to give it a better review. So reviews change, and that's why I don't always do the rating thing. But for this format of videos going forward, they are going to be rated per season, and then we'll do a whole overall series. And then eventually I'll do a video, once I've done all the TV shows I want to do, I'll do a video rating them all, putting them in tier lists, you know, lists. There's going to be a lot going forward, and that's why I wanted to do a continuous series. But talking about how I think of the series in general, I think it's got to go in the 7 out of 10 region for season 1. I just think that there is a lot to delve into with season 1, but for me it's just the weaker end of Buffy. That maybe it's because it's the first season, they don't get a lot of stretch room, you know, there's not a lot of room to take risks per se, because I think when Buffy takes risks is when it gets better, like episodes like Hush and The Body, Once More With Feeling, which is a very underrated episode if you ask me. So yeah, that's my list. It's not a list, you idiot. That's my video for today, the first of the Buffy series. So for me today, it's Thursday. I have got a long editing day planned. Well, editing evening planned, shall I say, at this point, because it's 5:45. So that's season 1 done. Now, season 2 will be next Friday. Now, I want to point something else out right now. I am going to be recording season 2 right now. So, don't go thinking I'm only wearing the same t-shirts. And by the way, I know I'm wearing this very similar t-shirt to what I wore for the Pop Vinyls. I don't wear the same clothes all the time. A lot of my clothes are blue. A lot of them are plain blue tees that are different materials. This is a different material to the one I wore last time. But you will be seeing me in the same video next Friday. You will be seeing me in the same top next Friday. It's simply because I am recording it straight after. That way I've got a whole week to edit the second video. So the second season may just be a better video simply because of editing. So I've been Squivo. This has been Squivosphere. Facebook, Twitter, Patreon. It's all going to be in the description below. I thank you all for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it. Hopefully, maybe going forward I can do a little bit more detail. But for me, season 1, because it's shorter, it's a shorter video. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, folks, on Squivosphere.
Science? Read me the